Hello, this is Lindy. Welcome to another Friday Reads. And I have lots of books to tell you about, starting with two book clubs and a couple of book-related online events that I attended in the past week. And then I read a bunch of books, and so here we go. So, Feminist Book Club. We were discussing Lynn Cody's book, Watching You Without Me. I was glad that this was our pick because I had already read it back in 2020, and I have a brief review on my book blog. I'll link to that if you're interested in more about that book. And for next month, we picked Home Waltz by G.A. Grisenthwaite. He is an Indigenous man. Yes, Feminist Book Club. Our philosophy is any book that we discuss, we look at through a feminist lens, and so any book is suitable for Feminist Book Club. And then my YA Book Club, we always pick two books for our meetings. And this time, the two that we discussed were Hunting by Stars by Cherie, Dimaline, which is the sequel to the Marrow, Thieves. And the other one was They Both Die at the End by Silvera. They Both Die at the End. I tried reading that when it first came out, and I think I might have lasted an hour and a half into the audiobook, and I gave up. And I wasn't the only one who gave up on it in my book club, but other people liked it all right, or I think the general consensus was we're not the right audience for it since it's aimed at teens, and most of us are 50 and older in that book club, and the question of what would we do if we knew it was the last day of our life maybe just isn't as interesting to us. I don't know. Anyway, next month, both of our books are going to be by Indigenous authors. We're going to do The Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline, Boulley, and Border, the graphic novel adaptation of Thomas King's short story, and the graphic novel artist is Natasha, Donovan. I guess I should have mentioned that Cherie Dimaline is also an Indigenous writer. She's a Metis, and we kind of had a theme for this month, I guess, and that was grassroots demand. Dimaline said that she never intended to write a sequel to the Marrow, Thieves, but when she would go out to schools to talk about the book, young people were just so enthusiastic about it, and seeing their own Indigenous selves reflected in an exciting adventure book really made a big difference to them, and they begged her to write more. So that's why there's this sequel, Hunting by Stars. And grassroots. Oh yeah, They Both Die at the End, which I think has a really good title, even though I didn't care for the book. So that one, again, was from a couple of years ago, but it's really come to the fore through TikTok, which is influencing young people to pick it up. And in fact, my niece, who's 23, that's how she heard about it, I think. And we did talk about it after she'd read it. She didn't much care for it. Anyway, the two book-related events that I attended, one was a launch for a collection of articles on the topic that's the title of the book. The title is International LGBTQ+ Literature for Children and Young Adults. And often these scholarly type, research collections can be pretty dry in the launch version anyway. But this one, they had, I don't know, maybe 7 different contributors, including somebody from Slovenia, a couple people from Sweden, someone from the Philippines. And I was really interested. So it was somebody from my YA book club who had alerted me to this book coming out. And she asked me afterwards if I thought, that we should buy the book, or that someone should buy the book. And I said, yes, but a university, because the hardcover is $150, the ebook is $50. And I would love to read it, but, and have it as a reference, but definitely not for my personal collection. And the other book event was, it was hosted by Pen Canada, and it was a conversation called Damned Funny. Faith, Fiction, and the Hilarity of Hell. And the 2 authors were Randy Boyagoda and John Irving. And I love this conversation. I also love that they didn't care about revealing spoilers for Randy's most recent book, which is called, Dante's Indiana. It's about a Dante theme park. And I found out that Irving has a new book coming out in the fall, and it's called The Last Chairlift. So really looking forward to that. So now we're going to get to the books that I finished. I mentioned last week that I was going to be starting Spellbound. And, that's Frida's Tale. Spellbound is by Bishak Sam. And last week I told you about her collection of short stories called Apsara Engine in graphic novel format. And so Bishak is a trans femme South Asian cartoonist. And it is just excellent to pair this memoir with her collection of short stories, because most of the time that she's showing her life in this is from the time when she was writing that Apsara Engine and trying to find a publisher for it. She had been working as an architect and was feeling really unsatisfied, and so it starts here with her quitting her job and why, and then she's living alone in Brooklyn with her cat Ampersand, and yes, so the interesting, one really different thing about this is that she has kind of like an avatar for herself, a cis woman named Angeline, who's also Bengali American, and everything else about the situation is parallel to Bishak Sam's situation, except she's telling it with a cis woman narrator. And she explains this sort of at the beginning and then at the very end of the book, because Bishak was in 48 or 49 when she realized she was trans. So she calls herself a late bloomer. Got the cat. You heard about Ampersand? Oh man. So anyway, it is. It's a sweet story. She has these great rants about boorish behavior, especially the hipster types. And let me just show you an example. Her art is very clear. It's in full color. You can see taking space up on the subway. She's a bit of a misanthrope. She talks about her vegetarian meals often, and I'm here for that. And even at the end, there's a recipe for Cherie. Yeah, good stuff, good stuff. The other book that I had mentioned at my last Friday reads was The Girl Who Drew Butterflies by Joyce Sidman, which is a biography of Maria's Sybilla Merian, who was a German naturalist and artist who was born in 1647 in Germany. An amazing, amazing woman. This book is heavily illustrated. Its primary audience is children, probably ages 10 to 13 or 14. I highly recommend it for adults too, or pretty much any age from 10 or so up. And I have a short little video where I go through all of the pictures because it's just a gorgeous book. Really gives you the feel for the time period, has lots of information. And yeah, so if you want to see more of that, have a look at my other video. Then audiobooks. I listened to The Edge of the Sea by Rachel Carson. And this first came out in 1955, so that was 7 years before her Silent Spring. And she had written a couple of other books about the sea before this. It was actually a reread for me. I just was in the mood for more nature writing, and I specifically picked up Rachel Carson because the Book Naturalist Book Club is doing a author spotlight on Rachel Carson this month. So I think that Doris of Audiobooks and Heidi of My Reading Life will have more about that at the end of January. And the narrator of the edition that I listened to was Kaolani Lee. And this woman has written a play about the life of Rachel Carson. It's called A Sense of Wonder. And she has been performing that piece since 1991, I think, and then it was made into a film, maybe 2010, something like that. I haven't seen it myself, but it was cool to have Kaolani Lee doing the narration. One of the drawbacks, though, to have this book in audio format is that you don't have the illustrations. So the original had a lot of these creatures that she was talking about, all illustrated by wildlife artist Bob Hines. So it is full of amazing, amazing facts. Like there's this pen shell. It's a type of clam, and they secrete a substance that makes a sort of thread to attach themselves to rocks or to keep themselves in place. And historically, and still to this day, people gather those little fine threads and they spin it to make something that they call sea silk. And you could go down a whole internet rabbit hole to find out more about that. Once I finished that, I really wanted more about the sea. And so the book that I've started reading or listening to after that was The Brilliant Abyss by Helen Scales. And I'm about 30% into that one, so I'll tell you more next Friday. And another audiobook that I spent a long time with because it's a big book, The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois. It's like I said, colossal. It's intricately layered. it's hard to believe this is a debut novel. The author, Honoré Fanon Jeffers, she was recognized as a poet for her work as a poet prior to this, and based on this book, she's obviously very knowledgeable about the writings of W.E. Du Bois. In the audio, there are actually 3 narrators, and they do different timelines. I'll tell you more about that in the end, but I'll tell you that what it's about, if you don't know, it's a family saga, and it stretches all the way back to 17th century, basically, with multiple timelines. But there's a central character in the contemporary timeline. Her name is Ailey Garfield. She's the youngest of 3 daughters in a black family, and it's basically her coming of age in the late 20th century. Her family has got Indigenous Creek as well as white heritage, and as I said, they're a black family. And the story is centered on the piece of land that's tied to her family history. It's located in what's now the state of Georgia. So we start out with the Creek people who were living there originally. And Ailey herself, she's headstrong, she's sulky, she's grudge-holding, and pretty self-indulgent. It isn't until she's studying, nearing the end of her master's degree, actually, that she starts acting like a responsible adult. And that's about 25 hours into the audiobook. So I found that a bit rough, emotionally as a reader. And I found it a bit saggy in the middle. We start having, a whole bunch of information about her oldest sister, Lydia, and I thought there was too much detail there. Basically, if maybe some of that would have been about her middle sister, Coco, who's a lesbian, I would have been more forgiving. I don't know. Still, I do really recommend this book. And so, so the narrators, Karen Chilton, I think, is doing the contemporary timeline, and Eden Raleigh Ojo is doing the historic timelines. And then in between chapters, there are excerpts from W.E.B. Du Bois's writings, and Prentice Onayemi reads those. So, as an audio package, it's very satisfying. And one of the things that you miss out with audio is a family tree, but I did find it online on the HarperCollins website. I'll include a link, I guess, in the description in case any of you are interested. Frida, she's got to give me some love. So, major themes in this love songs are intergenerational family trauma, multi-ethnic identities, shadeism, sexual violence towards women and girls, misogynoir, and marginalized people in higher education, I guess. Yeah. It brought... Those of you who like cats, here's Frida. There she is. I love the way that it was like it was in conversation with other books that I had read. It worked really well together with them. And the ones that came to mind are Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi, 400 Souls by Ibram Kendi and Keisha Blaine, and All the Days Past, All the Days to Come by Mildred Taylor. That's the final book in the Logan family series. You might know Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. That's probably one of her more famous books in that series. And even the Peach Cobbler and Peaches, because they had this peach orchard in Georgia. It reminded me of the couple of stories in the Church Ladies book. What was that? Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Disha Filia. So yeah, lots of good listening there. And then I moved on to this audio called Arsenic and Adobo, a far different type of book, rom-com mystery, basically. And I almost bailed after an hour because romantic comedy really is not my thing, but I stayed for the food. So it's about Leela, who's in her mid-20s, I think. She comes home from living in the big city to small town Illinois, and she's there to help out her aunt in her family restaurant of Filipino food. And Leela, she has this good heart, but she just hates to admit that she makes mistakes. And she has, I think, at least 3 guys who are interested in her, and of course aunties who are trying to, make sure she gets married. But people keep dying around her. I guess you could call this a cozy mystery because the people who die, none of them are good people. It's a totally unbelievable plot, but it's pretty fun. It's entertaining. There's things like a large duffel bag. It's found under a floorboard in just a regular house. I'm thinking, how big are these floorboards? Anyway, never mind. It's the food content. So Leela keeps, she likes to invent desserts, and one of her creations was a calamansi curd pie with a coconut shortbread crust. Okay, so number 1, calamansi. I have only tasted calamansi in Japan, and it's a citrus fruit that's kind of like a lime and an orange together. I talked to the 2 young people who were running this stand that I got the calamansi juice from in Tokyo, and they were telling me that they grow this fruit on their farm, on their family's farm. And I did come home with a bottle of concentrate that they made, but since then I haven't seen calamansi anything anywhere. But I was looking in Japanese shops, so now I know to go to a Filipino grocery store to look for it, and I will. Did I say that there was ginger in it? Calamansi ginger pie with the coconut shortbread crust. Anyway, it inspired me to make citrus curd. This is the time of year to get great citrus fruit. So I made a pink grapefruit curd with fresh ginger and a little bit of cayenne, and it was just so yummy. And I made it totally vegan, for any of you who are wondering. I use chickpea flour instead of egg yolks, and coconut oil instead of butter. So that's from the, it's very adapted, but basically I got the idea from the chickpea flour cookbook, and that's by Camilla Salisbury. Yeah. So Arsenic and Adobo. I didn't say who the author is. Who's the author? Mia Manansala. And by the way, she has recipes on her blog too, like if you want to make ube jam. Yum. So this book reminded me of Dial A for Aunties. That was by Jessie Sutanto. And I bailed on that one. It was just a little too frantic for my taste. But I think that if you really like Arsenic and Adobo, you would also like Dial A for Aunties. That one is, what is it, Chinese? Let me just think. Yeah. Chinese-Indonesian family in California, I think, running a wedding business. It also, Arsenic and Adobo also reminded me of a book that I really liked by Ovidia Yu, who's a Singaporean author. And again, it's a kind of cozy murder mystery with a restaurant at its core. Except this one has an old lady sleuth. And the first one is called Auntie Lee's Delights. And so there's Peranakan food. Food. Books about food. Love it. What else? I read one more, or listened to one more audiobook. It was called Stories of Métis Women. Tales My Kukum Told Me is a subtitle. And that one is sort of edited and collected, I guess, by two Métis women. No, yeah, I think they're both Métis. Bailey Oster and Marilyn Lizet. And so what they've done is they've transcribed portions of audio recordings, memories of different women, and Métis women, obviously. And so if you like oral history, then I think you will like this. The introduction is by Audrey Poitras, and Audrey is the president of the Métis Nation of Alberta, and she has been president for a record-breaking 8 terms, but I felt like in her introduction she was kind of phoning it in, unfortunately. It might have gone over better if it was a speech instead of something that was in a book. And speaking of book format, I believe that the entire book is also available in Michif. It's been translated. So that's pretty cool. And then one final book that I read, also Métis, and this one is by the artist Christi Belcourt. It's actually a museum catalog from when Christi had her first retrospective, and that was jointly done by a museum in Ottawa and one in Thunder Bay. And her art is, it's partly, well, it's definitely inspired by Métis floral beadwork, but she does it using either a really fine paintbrush or a knitting needle to make dots of paint where the beads would be, and then some of her more recent paintings kind of are more like the woodland style. Norval Morrisseau. Just find one of those. This whole book is full of images, and I'm going to there's more of the woodland style, I guess. And that And she's got little phones on the top and the bottom. This piece is called What Are We Teaching Our Children? There are 3 long pieces of texts by 3 different authors writing about Christi Belcourt and her work and her activism and her philosophy of interconnected life. And it's absolutely beautiful, totally beautiful. I might show you a video of the individual pages, or some of the pages anyway, so you can appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching, and let me know in the comments if you've read any of these, if you're interested in any of these, and thank you always. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.